I'm going to start our call today with sharing a little bit about the Akashic Records. In the meantime, I would love to hear from all of you. If you have a specific intention for joining me here today, if you want to share it in the chat box, I would love to know what you would like to receive from our time together and what called you to be here with us today. I started this practice of accessing the Akashic Records years ago. And before I started this practice, I was developing my psychic intuitive abilities in other ways. I had been working as a holistic health coach, and I found that I was very intuitive to the point where some of my clients started recommending me to their friends and family and actually referring to me as a medical intuitive, even though that is not what I thought of myself as. I just was naturally very intuitive. Yet my intuitive abilities sometimes they would just be so clear and things would come through that I would share that would be so psychically accurate. Yet my intuitive abilities were inconsistent. It's like I didn't have complete access. And then I started this practice of accessing the Akashic Records. And wow, it catalyzed so much spiritual growth and the development of my psychic abilities so quickly, so naturally. It was incredible. I developed the practice. I first accessed the Akashic Records. I actually read a book by Linda Howe. And halfway through the book, she prompts you to open the Akashic Records with a prayer. And I remember when I said that prayer, my entire body, every cell of my body, my entire consciousness was flooded with this exquisite energy. It felt like this divine spiritual energy. It felt so healing. It felt like this energy of unconditional love. What came through first was the energy. And then after that was increased psychic and intuitive awareness. It was like I had been granted access to better understanding the subconscious mind, or you might call it the cosmic mind, the divine mind. And it felt like it happened really naturally, like it just occurred through saying this prayer. Wow, it's so nice to see so many familiar faces here. I have a lot of my Akashic Metamorphosis students here, and I'm really happy to see you. Thank you for joining today. I'm taking a moment to tune into the chat. Beautiful. Thank you for this share. Okay, so that was many years ago. Over the years, I've started teaching people how to access the Akashic Records. And I have found that we all have the ability to access the Akashic Records, and we all do it in different ways. The Akashic Records, if we're talking about the Akashic Records, because there are many ways to connect with divinity, we can simply call it prayer, communion with God, talking to God. People connect in so many different ways. Some people connect through nature. Some people call it like connecting to their higher selves or their soul or the cosmic mind. Some people receive a lot of spiritual insight when they read spiritual texts like the Bible. There are many ways to connect. I started off by connecting through the Akashic Records, and the Akashic Records are the subtle energetic imprint of everything that has ever happened, everything that is happening, and everything that could happen. The word Akasha comes from the Sanskrit word for ethers. Ether is like space. It's the primordial element. So Akasha is the element that is believed to have given birth to all the elements of wind, fire, earth, water. Before all of that existed, there was Akasha. So from one perspective, you could think of Akasha as source, space. And then the Akashic Records are that subtle energetic imprint of everything that has been, is, and could be. It's also known as the Book of Life or the Mind of God. The Akashic Records has many different terms for it. There are many ways to access the Akashic Records. I personally access the Akashic Records by saying a prayer. And I have a prayer that I've channeled that I've been using for years that I love. I'm gonna share it with all of you now, and I'm actually gonna open up the Akashic Records of the group because there is so much I have to share around accessing the Akashic Records. I have an entire course on it. So I'm gonna tune into everybody who is here with me live around what would be most relevant and empowering for you to receive at this time, specific to your relationship with divinity, your access to the Akashic Records. Before I do that, I'm going to share with you a little bit about the prerequisites to accessing the Akashic Records. One is the capacity to come into a still, spacious state of consciousness. When we are accessing the Akashic Records and receiving insight, perspective, energy from the Akashic Records, we become a channel. And a channel, I think of a channel as like a straw. You are receiving from the divine mind. When our human mind is full, when there's a lot of mental chatter, if we have a lot of attachments to certain beliefs or opinions, we will be inhibited from creating that spacious and still state of mind. So something that I teach in my training is the importance of developing Akasha, spaciousness, developing the element of Akasha within our own lives and within our own minds. And you can do that in really simple ways, like taking time to abide in stillness, whether it's a formal meditation practice, or I personally love to sit outside and simply observe the sun, the sky, the trees. I'm looking out my window right now, connect with the birds. Taking the time to disconnect from like our thoughts and the doing, the productivity, the like, I need to be doing, I need to be producing, I need to be thinking, there's so much to do. And instead beginning to allow more Akasha to stream into our lives, knowing that it's something that we can do consciously and intentionally by allowing for spaciousness in our lives. Because this is my life's work, I don't have a very tight schedule ever. I have so much time in between each client. And before each client, I take the time to just abide in stillness, to connect to their soul. That practice begins to transform our consciousness. And then over time, we're better able to come into states of consciousness, like mental states that are more still and more spacious. That stillness, that spaciousness allows us to channel. Another prerequisite to accessing the Akashic Records is humility. Well, it's a balance of humility with the recognition of our inherent divinity. So first, let's talk about humility. If we have strong beliefs or strong opinions, if we tend to believe we are right or superior, for example, in our relationships or in our worldviews and our perspectives of politics, if we tend to orient ourselves more towards like, this is my perspective and this is the truth, this is like the superior perspective. If we have any of that within us, we're not going to be able to access the Akashic Records so clearly, because what what is the Akashic Records? It's the culmination of all perspectives. So when you're accessing the Akashic Records, I think of it as elevating and expanding my state of consciousness, elevating and expanding my perspective. If I have any attachment to my everyday human perspectives or beliefs or opinions, that attachment will keep me more rooted here in my everyday human consciousness, like in my mind. So through this practice, and I feel like I came to this practice with a lot of really strong opinions. And then over time, as I practiced more and more, I'm able more to observe my thoughts, to observe my emotions, to observe my perspectives and my opinions and honor them, like truly validate them for myself without believing that they are inherently true or real, or without getting too attached to the idea that they are superior or better than any other like opinions or perspectives. Because ultimately, this practice has us become more fluid in our perspectives. That fluidity is what allows us to elevate our perspectives and come into a state of consciousness that encompasses more perspectives. If you think of the mind of God, like what really is the mind of God? It's what is God? It's everyone. It's everything. Everything that could ever be is encompassed by divinity. So if we're wanting to access the mind of divinity, then it requires a capacity to like expand into encompassing, embracing more perspectives. So that's one aspect of humility. Another aspect of humility is a humility that allows us to surrender to our channel. If we have a more like, how can I put words to this? There's something around humility that allows us to surrender and open. The mentality that I find that is most productive to accessing the Akashic Records is the mentality or the approach of, I know nothing. I know nothing. First, surrendering to that, like, I know nothing. In the I know nothing, you become that clear vessel. Like you can imagine it like a clear straw. And then you are available to receive. I know nothing. But here comes the other part, like it's a paradox. It's I know nothing, total humility. As a human being, I am so limited in my perspectives. Human beings, I remember when I was a little girl and I would go to church or learn about Christianity, they would always say like, humans are sinners. And I'm like, like, why are you saying that? But there's something around that recognition that I now understand. Like if we recognize our sinful nature of just a tendency as a human to be more self-centered, then we can come into like a deeper sense of humility that can allow us access to the Akashic Records while simultaneously embracing our divinity. It's I know nothing and I have access to infinite divine wisdom and potential and possibility. Because while I am this mere, like limited, flawed, mortal human being, I am also an aspect, an expression of divinity made in the image of God. I am that. So when we can hold that in our psyche, in perfect balance, like holds that contradiction of our humanity with humility, of our divinity with like the full embrace of that grandiosity, like I am an extension of God. and that inherent within me is divine creative power, divine creative potential I get to create here, similarly to how God creates. And as an extension of God, I have access to divine wisdom. That to me is a foundation that allows us clear access to the Akashic Records. Another prerequisite is the intention and the belief, the faith that we place in every word that we say as we are saying the prayer to access the Akashic Records. So I find that in my years of training hundreds of people in accessing the Akashic Records, I recognize that there aren't inherent blocks to accessing the Akashic Records. However, we can block ourselves by our own disbelief and lack of faith. And sometimes entering into a practice of accessing the Akashic Records can require us to begin to dismantle this lack of faith, anything that would have us not feel worthy of accessing the divine mind, would have us feel not good enough, would have us feel not capable. I feel like much of humanity, like most human beings, have at least in some way at some time received conditioning, received perspectives that have led them to believe that they are not actually one with divinity. And everybody has experienced that in different ways. An example for me was like as a child and also as a woman, believing that true divine wisdom only would come through a priest, never through me. And that there were spiritual authorities who knew more than me, who knew better than me. Everybody, I think in some way, has had their own form of some sort of conditioning that they may have internalized. And it may be important at some point to use your Akashic practice to explore your subconscious and to ask, are there any beliefs, any perspectives of myself that could be blocking me? And those beliefs can be on the side of like arrogance, like we're just really attached to like I'm right, like that intellectual, like I know that this is how it is, because the Akashic Records is infinite possibility. It's actually not going to reveal to you what people sometimes think it will reveal. Like sometimes people think the Akashic Records will tell you how it is, or tell you the future, or tell you the past. But the deeper you go into the Akashic Records, the more that you can see that this experience of reality is actually incomprehensible to the human mind, meaning that it's an experience of infinite possibility. So it's almost like the past, all potential past timelines that could ever exist, as well as all potential future timelines. And it's not that reality or life is any one way. It's more that we are these divine creators who get to experience the reflection of our subconscious, our unconscious beliefs and projections. They get projected onto reality, and it actually shapes and informs reality in some way. So the Akashic Records tends to work in a more fluid way. It doesn't show you like this is how it is. And the insight that comes through the Akashic Records can at times be paradoxical or contradictory. It is always speaking to what is relevant and healing and balancing for the person that is receiving the transmission in that moment. And that at times can be contradictory. You could see that the guidance at one time can head in one direction, and then at another time can head in another direction. And it's simply because that is the learning, the lesson that your soul is currently experiencing. But it doesn't share like ultimate truths, because from that perspective, there is no ultimate truth. So potential blocks can be on the side of arrogance, or it can be on the side of like just not good enough, not fully trusting in our divine perfection. And then that can manifest in many ways where people, basically our subconscious beliefs about ourselves or beliefs about divinity, beliefs about life, they will come up in our Akashic practice. And an example is that sometimes people in my training will believe that they're not accessing the Akashic records because when they say the prayer and go to access it, they're not channeling it the same exact way that I do. So if you're prone to comparison, for example, then your Akashic practice may reflect that. Something else that I've seen is that people, when they access the Akashic records, will channel the most exquisite divine healing energy, like the most amazing energy will be flowing through them. And it's felt, it's like, it's tangible, it's palpable, you can feel it. It's a powerful, strong energy. If you're sensitive, you can feel it. They can feel the energy. Yet, if that person is like prone to ideas of I'm not good enough, I'm not doing this right, they'll suddenly conclude like, I'm not good enough, I'm not doing this right because like these specific, accurate, psychic, verbal transmissions and visual experiences did not happen for me. Instead of like really truly honoring the profound healing transformational potential of that energy and the way in which that energy is actually transforming our consciousness and our perspective to have our consciousness come into greater resonance with the perspective of the Akashic records. Everybody's access and channel is different. Trust is a huge prerequisite. Trust in your connection to divinity, your oneness with spirit, your oneness with God. Trust in your divine perfection. I always think of that quote, ask and you shall receive. Knock and the door will be opened. It's like as you say the prayer, as you set in the intention, trust in the power of prayer, in the power of this intention. Like as we cultivate faith, our intention can manifest more readily. So I feel that faith is a huge part of this. And the great thing about accessing the Akashic records is you can start wherever you are, even if like your faith is kind of wonky, even if you're working through different ideas of like, oh, I don't think I can do this, or even if there's some resistance or some judgment towards your practice, that is perfectly fine. As long as you stick to it and keep practicing, you'll find that over time, your channel will become clearer and clearer and clearer. This is not a practice that people like dive into and wow, it's like perfect and perfectly developed. It's like a muscle, like going to the gym and working out. Like over time, you develop it. But I feel that the gifts that it brings into our lives are instant. From that very first time of accessing the Akashic records, we start to receive the benefits. And the benefits of this practice, I feel, are essential to our well-being in this day and age. Essential, whether you call it accessing the Akashic records or praying, some sort of spiritual practice, I do not feel that we can thrive emotionally, spiritually, even physically without a practice like this. Currently, humanity is moving through a lot. And humanity as a whole is harboring many distorted, detrimental, painful perspectives and beliefs. There's a lot of trauma that's still being worked through and healed. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of suffering everywhere. It's everywhere. And while we are in these human incarnations, whether we realize it or not, we are connected to the collective energies on this planet, to the collective human consciousness. So when the collective human consciousness, I think of it as like streams of consciousness that move through. And sometimes we can like feel different streams, and they can bring up perhaps like despair, or even like, because humanity is doing a lot of relational healing, I feel like there are a lot of beliefs around victimhood, beliefs that give rise to hatred, beliefs that give rise to like blaming someone else, just beliefs that give rise to like evil. Like that still exists on our planet. And as like we're all empathic to some degree or another, we're all going to feel it in some way. And to like feel that and experience that is like deeply painful. And I feel like it's impossible to maintain true spiritual health and true emotional health, where we are loving our lives, loving being alive, living with a lot of love, living with a lot of compassion, living with a lot of like potential and possibility and enthusiasm for life, living with a lot of peace, unless we can merge these like collective streams, all of this that's happening on the planet right now, with the wisdom of God, the wisdom of divinity. Like, it's like without a higher perspective, we can fall into deep states of suffering. We can fall into despair. We can fall into agitation. We can, even like personally, we can fall into like super intense, divorces where there's a ton of antagonism and there's just so much hatred, or we can fall into depression, or we can fall into patterns of like accepting a job that we hate because we think that it's the only way that we can make money. We need to be slaves for this, give all of our energy towards this thing that we don't even really believe in because we don't feel worthy, because that's one of the collective beliefs. There are a ton of collective beliefs right now that are not conducive to us actually living our divine potential. Divinity, spirit, God loves us. Life, like the universe, is here to support us, but simultaneously reflect our beliefs, reflect our energy. If we don't feel worthy, that'll be reflected. If we feel like this is a world full of lack where we need to like work ourselves to the bone just to survive, that belief will be reflected. And for me personally, the only way that I found to effectively return to the truth of this experience is by accessing the Akashic Records, which will continuously reveal to you what is actually possible for you. It's a perspective that instills within us so much peace, and then restores the truth of possibility. We are not so limited. We do not have to loop in these karmic patterns or habits for years on end. Just because other people around us are living in a certain way, because they're harboring certain beliefs, does not mean we need to live in that way. There's actually so much potential and possibility for us here. There is so much love for us. And when we're connected to that higher perspective, it brings so much peace. And then it restores to us our creative divine power to live a life that feels resonant with our souls, where like we can live according to our heart's desires, knowing, trusting, believing that that is what God wants for us. It changes the whole game of life. I am obsessed with this practice, completely obsessed, because it changed everything for me. And it's so simple. It's like we say a prayer and we open to what comes through. And little by little, our life changes, and it changes through the transformation of our perspectives and of our consciousness. Just taking a moment to tune into the chat here. I love this question. Thank you. How can we know we are really getting information from the Akashic Records and not from our imagination? So something that I teach in my training is that it's ever since we were little kids, many of us are told it's just your imagination. Like a lot of us that had multidimensional sight, if we shared it with someone else, they're like, oh no, it's just your imagination. It's just your imagination, as if your imagination were nothing. Yet, the reality of this experience of life is that it is our imagination that creates worlds. All that currently is God's imagination. It's like the way that I've seen it is when I access the Akashic Records, it's like everything that could ever possibly be exists. It all is. And at the same time, nothing actually exists. It's all like a dream, an illusion. Eventually, we all, our physical bodies die, and then our souls die, and we all just return to source, to one, to nothing, to the void from which source came. And that's all happening simultaneously. And so through that, we can recognize that there is a validity to our imagination. Anything that we channel and comes through, it's going to come through the mind, because that's how our human bodies make sense of this human experience. We use the mind. The transmissions come through the minds. They will arise in the mind, and it may feel similar to your imagination. However, what comes through the Akashic Records, I have found it holds a certain frequency. It's a frequency, I experience it as like a frequency of unconditional love and of peace and of possibility. I can bring the most like painful, like atrocious, like dense things to my channel, and I'll just be like, about it. But once I bring it to my channel, the energy, the perspective that comes through, even if it's dealing with something like that for me just feels dark and dense and intense, it comes with a lot of love. You know that it's not the Akashic Records if there's a lot of fear, if there's an urgency, if there's like a telling someone what to do. The Akashic Records would never tell you what to do. Higher divine wisdom honors free will, and like truly at a core level honors whatever choices and decisions you make. So the Akashic Records don't tell you what to do. The Akashic Records also won't like condemn you to one destiny. So they won't tell you like, this is your future, this is how it's going to be, like no matter what. It's an energy and a message of love, of possibility, one that restores peace. However, if there are some nuances to this, and if like I'll give an example. So, and this is just a silly example, but say it's like you're doing a reading for yourself and you've been dating someone and you're really interested in them and you're really attached, but like, some things don't feel quite right. So you're doing your own self-Akashic reading on it. And then what comes through is a perspective around those things that feel not quite right for you are actually not resonant for you on a soul level. Like it's not a match for you. Like, because on a soul level, it's like the Akashic Records may reveal how perhaps you don't yet feel worthy of like this true deep love, or because you're so desperately searching for love outside of yourself, you are in a sense, getting attached in situations where there isn't real compatibility, where a relationship may not be sustainable. So all of this may come with a lot of love and a lot of peace, because the Akashic Records knows that you're so worthy of love, and that you're so worthy of your heart's desire. So if you open to that possibility, that can manifest in your life. That's the Akashic perspective. But the human may not receive it with so much love and possibility if they're like really attached to this one relationship, if they're like really invested in it and they're like, no, it has to be this person, like this aspect of them can change. It's okay. I can like learn to accept it. Like we can make it work. Like if there's more of that human like attachment going on, then it may not feel like love and peace and possibility in the moment. Does that make sense how I explained that? I'll give an example for you when I turned to my Akashic practice for something that for me had felt really traumatizing and dark and dense. Was before I began my Akashic practice, one of my best friends committed suicide. And it was devastating for me. Like I was in so much pain. I blamed myself. There was so much guilt. I felt like it shouldn't have happened. She should still be alive. Once I started my Akashic practice, that was one of the first things I explored. And so I asked about that. And my friend came through and she said something so funny. She's like, Danny, hi. She's like, I've been wanting to cheer you on, but I haven't been wanting to creep you out. Like, and she was like making a joke saying that she wanted to cheer me on in life. Um, but she didn't want to like creep me out, like showing up as a ghost. So the first thing she says is like this joke. And then she's like, Danny, like, do you remember there was one time we went to a Halloween party and she took some psychedelic mushrooms and she started getting really freaked out and she was just having a bad time. And so I had gone to the Halloween party with her and with our other best friend. So she told us, she's like, I'm not having a good time. Like, I'm out of here. See you tomorrow. And we were just like, okay, like, bye. See you later. See you tomorrow. And she left. And she was like, Danny, do you remember that Halloween party where I wasn't having a good time? And so I decided to leave. And you weren't like sad, you weren't devastated. You were just like, okay, I'll see you tomorrow. And then the next day, I think we got together for brunch the next day and we just saw her tomorrow. She's like, well, it's basically like that. I wasn't having a hard time. This world is not an easy world for a sensitive little fairy like me. So I decided to leave. And she's like, just how during that party, I was like, bye, see you tomorrow. Like, I'll see you tomorrow. Like, in the moment of your death, there I'll be. And the reality of this experience of life is that the soul is eternal. This experience is so infinite and eternal. And I had all this negative conditioning around suicide, but she showed me another perspective. And I was like, oh. And she showed me how her suicide actually broke the hearts open of our entire friend group. And it's true. Our entire friend group, we grieved so much. We like so much pain, and it made us all kinder, more compassionate people. And because the pain was so deep in our friend group, those of us that weren't as spiritually oriented, we all turned towards spirituality. And it positively impacted all of us in the long run, where we became kinder, more compassionate people. And we also came closer to God. Because when someone dies, it's like, well, how do you get closer to them? You miss them so much. There's this desperation. It's like, how do you get closer to them? Well, you come closer to God because that's where they are now. You come closer to spirit because that's where they are now. So that's one example of a way in which the Akashic Records works. Another example that was really profound for me was when I first started my practice. I was suffering with an eating disorder that I had developed when I was like, I remember at 4 years old, I used to like binge eat Oreos. So it'd been a coping mechanism that I'd had my entire life. And when I was older, it turned into binge eating and purging. So I started engaging in bulimia. And I had gone to all these professionals, but I feel like it only made things worse. Like it didn't actually heal what was happening for me. And I really wanted to stop because it was extremely detrimental to my digestive system. And I had actually, at the time, I also had an autoimmune disease, which is now fully healed. But at the time, I had an autoimmune disease, and I suspected that the binging and purging had damaged my digestive system, which had then left me susceptible to then developing an autoimmune disease. That was what I thought at the time. So I really wanted to stop doing this, but it was like a compulsion and addiction. And I was seeking professional help that wasn't really helping. I was still doing it. It wasn't healing. So when I first started my Akashic practice, I brought it to my Akashic practice. And I'm sharing this with you because you may have a situation in your life which is completely different than this, but the insight that came through may be applicable to that situation. To if there's a pattern in your life that you've been like perpetuating and you're like, oh, why do I keep doing this? Like, I want to stop. I feel like it's not actually supporting my happiness, my health, my well-being. So when I brought this situation to the Akashic Records, what I was shown was how I had developed all of this guilt and shame around being bulimic. It was like this extremely shameful thing that I had developed a lot of resistance around. The professional help wasn't helping because the people, the therapists that I was seeing were relating to me from a place of your bulimia is a problem that needs to be fixed, that needs to be solved. So that projection from my facilitator, from the person that I was going to for healing, was actually aggravating that shame and that guilt that I felt. The Akashic Records told me the first step was to come into full acceptance. Because in order to change, transform, or heal anything, you must transmute any and all resistance that you have to it. Anything that you resist persists because your resistance, your fighting against it, your judgment of it is actually giving it energy. And as you're giving it energy, it only grows. It continues to exist. So the Akashic Records showed me how I was unconsciously perpetuating the pattern through my resistance to it. Humanity, I feel like there's like a collective belief that if we like fight something, if we like resist it enough, then like we'll win against it. But that's not actually true. So once that was in my awareness, I was like, okay, that was one layer. So then I was guided on how to accept the bulimia. And this was done by showing me how the eating disorder began and how it served me when I began. So I remember at 4 years old eating like entire things of like Oreos, like entire sleeves of cookies. And I was shown how in those moments I was under stress, I was feeling upset, and I was really craving love and comfort. And for a child, it's like the way that I was shown was me as a child, I was like craving the love of a mother. And so because I was craving the love of like a mother, I would turn to my earthly mother. I would turn to Pachamama. And it's like, well, how can I fill myself with the love of the mother? It's like, well, just fill myself with delicious, yummy gifts from the Divine Mother, which is Pachamama, the earth. So then I became aware of what I was doing, why I was doing it, how the binge eating was like sedating me in some ways and like soothing me and calming me and helping me with those overwhelming emotions. And then I was also shown how the bulimia began and how it was like an unconscious attempt to like release all this like negative energy that I had taken on. It was actually my attempt at purging, at releasing. I was so overwhelmed with negative energies, with negative emotions. When I was a teenager, when I was in my early 20s, I did not have, now I do a lot with my energetic hygiene. which allows me to maintain like pretty peaceful emotional states. But back then I knew nothing about energetic hygiene. So I was a deeply sensitive, deeply psychic being out in the world, like just interfacing with all these different energies and not knowing how to release them. So I developed this habit of binging and then purging as an attempt at purging those energies. It was also very comforting for me in times of overwhelming emotions. It was like, well, just eat tons of like dessert and like, I'd feel better. So basically, I saw how it was serving me. I saw it not as like, I had been relating to it as self-harm, as me hurting myself, as me like really damaging myself. So of course that created more shame. But I started to see like, oh wow, I'm actually just really doing my best. Like, I'm just doing my best to like support myself, to make myself feel better. I just at the time didn't know any better way to do it. So once I saw that, I could see the innocence of the behavior. Anytime we're wanting to heal something that we're doing that we don't want to do anymore, we have to come into acceptance of it. And then we have to see the innocence behind it. Because if we're in self-judgment, if we're in self-blame, self-condemnation, we will keep the energy of that habit alive. Self-acceptance is really important. Seeing our innocence, seeing how it serves, that helps us to forgive. Forgiveness is essential to healing something, to changing something that we want to change. So that allowed me to forgive myself. And then what I was told was, what came through my channel was that next time I want to binge eat, to treat myself to the absolute best desserts and foods from Erewhon. Erewhon is this grocery store in Los Angeles. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and it has like these really amazing, super healthy desserts. It's also it's like a very pricey place, so I didn't always shop there, even though it was my favorite. But I was guided to basically buy all my favorite things from Erewhon. My channel was like, whatever you're craving, go for it. Like, give yourself full permission to binge. And they were like, but the word binge now has a lot of negative connotation to it. Don't call it binging. From now on, you're going to call it goddess feasting. So I would buy like all my favorite foods. Like I'd be in this amazing grocery store, Erewhon, and it went from like this shameful thing that I was like resisting, like, oh my God, I'm engaging in this terrible addiction and it's causing this autoimmune disease and I'm such a bad, awful, broken person. It went from that to like, I'm going to go goddess feasting. So I'd go to Erewhon, I'd get my favorite foods, I'd go home, eat everything that I wanted. And then before I went to throw up, what I was instructed to do was to call it purging. Like really just call it purging. In plant medicine ceremonies, people will drink the plant medicine, and if they have a really strong emotion or thing that they're needing to like get out of them, sometimes it'll manifest as purging. And when I've purged on plant medicines, like I've seen the very thing I'm purging. I'm like, oh my God, I'm purging this belief. I'm purging this thought form. I'm purging this habit. They were like, don't think of it as something bad. Think of it as you purging things that you just want out of you, like whether it's negative thought forms, negative beliefs, negative energies. And before you stick your fingers down your throat, this to me had become like the most shameful, awful thing. So I would always do it with so much shame. It was like, no, first say a prayer around what it is that you're purging and really honor, like give gratitude to your body for helping you purge and honor the experience of throwing up into the toilet as something sacred. And so I did. And like, I think I probably goddess feasted all of like 4-5 times max. Never did I engage in bulimic behavior again. It was like magic. Like I'd been struggling with this for years. So that is the power of the Akashic Records, because it gets right to the core. And the Akashic Records, they know what works. They know what works. So when I was on this, I was like really in a deep healing journey. I had a lot to heal and a lot to work through when I came to this practice. And so I was obsessed with working with different practitioners. but it wasn't quite as effective or as accelerated. It wasn't like as efficient as my own Akashic channel. And I'm sharing this with all of you to inspire you in the development of your own Akashic channel, because there's so much divine wisdom that each and every one of us has access to, no exceptions. All you have to do to access this wisdom is be available for it. That's it. And this wisdom, when brought to the different circumstances of our lives, is life-changing. It can bring so much healing, so much transformation in a really effective way. The Akashic Records, they know you. They know you. So there's no guesswork. The transmissions are specific and precise. Yay, I'm glad that the story resonates. I'm reading all your messages in the chat. Okay, I'm going to answer this question here. Danny, what are your favorite practices to release feeling overwhelmed? Your favorite energy hygiene, especially for people in cities? Less of nature here. I'm going to take a moment to tune into that. Well, number one for me is simply the awareness that different energies are always moving through us. Constantly, different energies move through us. And these different energies may inspire different emotions or different thoughts. So then when I'm experiencing like negative perspectives of my life, or say negative perspectives of a loved one, or just like the emotions, I don't really take them very seriously, meaning I don't believe them. I honor that it's an energy moving through me. I also like to get present with the energy, to embrace it, to be in full acceptance of it. One of my favorite quotes that Miguel, my Huachumero here in Peru, says, he says it's not, wait, let me try to remember what he says. It's not about feeling good. It's about being good with the way you feel. So that acceptance, honoring that in this experience of life, we are simply going to experience the full spectrum, the full emotional spectrum. So then when I'm in more negative emotional states, it's okay. It's part of the human experience. But that negative emotional state, it's an energy. And sometimes that energy will suggest certain thoughts. You don't have to believe those thoughts. They're just thoughts running through. You don't have to act on those thoughts. They're just thoughts running through. So that allows you to remain connected to your true heart's intentions, to your prayers for your life, so that you're not swayed by those emotions or your thoughts. Meaning, in the past, I felt like I was more susceptible to acting from those thoughts or thinking they were real or true. An example would be, I always wanted to share transmissions online, like this one, but certain energies run through, right? Maybe one of those negative emotional energies would suggest like, oh, you're not good enough. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're going to make a fool out of yourself. Like, just observing like, oh, okay, but you don't have to give it any energy. Like, it doesn't mean it's real or true. It's just an energy moving through. And I feel like when you can create spaciousness between the emotions, the energies, the thoughts moving through, and just the awareness that there is the intention, your prayer is to live a life of love, to live a life of peace. Then you can accept it without giving it energy. And then the practices can become really efficient and effective. My favorite practice is accessing the Akashic Records. Another one for energy hygiene is I love when I have the energy, working out, I find can move a lot of energy. As you get your heart rate up, it like moves all the blood in a way which I find can impact our meridians, our energetic channels, and can serve to move stagnant energy. Same with like the stretching that we do in yoga, the presence that it brings to our bodies. I love nature, but you did say you are in a big city. But nature, for those of you that have access to it, it has such exquisite healing energy to provide us. And I find that there are ways in which I can open even more to receiving the energy of nature by setting the intention. I like to like lay on my stomach on the earth and be like, Pachamama, I love you. Like I receive your love. I receive your exquisite healing energies. And then that intention is what opens me to actually receive more of it versus, taking a walk in the park and not actually like consciously allowing it to be healing, to restore peace, to restore harmony. I find that how we relate to our practices really helps. I love breath work when we have a lot of stagnation or like more overwhelming emotions. A lot of resistance can arise when we do breath work. But if you just like push through and keep breathing and remain committed, it can move so much. When we're doing breath work, we're taking in breath is full of vitality. It's full of life force energy. So with breath work, we're building life force energy in our body and it's moving through our energetic channels, through our meridians. And it can move through stagnation. It can move through blocks. It can open us. If there's any sort of like repressed, suppressed emotions, it can also address that and it can expand and open our consciousness. All of these things are things I teach in the training because our energetic hygiene is so important for our channeling practice. I also occasionally will use plant allies like cacao. Cacao is such an exquisite and beautiful heart opener. I love to drink cacao before client sessions. It brings such an amazing energy, and I'll usually pray to my own heart and to my own channel, and then pray also for the person that I'm going to do a session for. But I find that cacao can be an incredible ally. She really like raises our frequency and can help us connect to spirit. I don't work too much with tobacco, but I know a lot of people who do. Other energetic. Plant baths are amazing. Put some like organic rose petals in a plant bath or chamomile or any plant that you feel called to. Plants are incredible allies. Here in Peru, in my retreats, we do these plant baths where Miguel, who's our Huachumero, our shaman, he boils plants. First, the plants are harvested with a lot of prayer and a lot of intention, and then they're boiled for a period of time with a lot of prayer and with an activation of the power of the plants. Every plant has like a magic, a love to share. And then we pour that liquid over our bodies, and it's not only like a physical cleansing, it's an energetic cleansing. So that's another magical practice. And if you're like at home in a city, then perhaps just getting in the bathtub with some rose petals, even drinking a tea with rose, because rose is a frequency. Plants are a frequency, so they can really support our frequency. They're such beautiful allies. I think of our divine, like my divine parents. I have like God, my heavenly Father, and I can turn to God through accessing the Akashic Records or praying. And then I have Pachamama, Mother Earth, my earthly mother. I can turn to her through the plant allies, through like doing a workout and addressing it through my body. Like I can address it physically. Saunas are so good for clearing as well. I love sweating things out. I highly recommend saunas. It can really help us clear, especially if done intentionally with the intention, the prayer of clearing, of releasing. We can address it with our bodies, or we can address it with spirit. Sometimes simply sitting in prayer can also be super magical. And I love to play with all of them. And I like to tune in with what's going on and then ask, like, what's going on? How may I best serve you? And then allow myself to be guided in that way. Just tuning into the chat right now, reading all of your messages. Okay, today has been amazing. I am so grateful to all of you for being here. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. There is a lot more that I want to share. I didn't get to share the prayer today, which I want to share with all of you. So I'm going to do a part 2. So I'm going to email you all the invite to part 2. And yeah, I'm going to end for today just to honor our time. I would love to share a few things with you. If you have any questions, you're welcome to email me. And I'm going to have a list of questions. I'm going to address some of them on the part 2. So any questions that you have, email me. I'm going to send all of you the replay. So you can just respond to the replay with your questions. I would also love to invite you to retreat with me in Peru. I have a retreat from November 1st to November 8th. And it's an Akashic Records retreat where we're going to be developing our Akashic practice together. And we're also going to be engaging in some of the indigenous practices here. Like we're going to do 2 Wachuma ceremonies. Wachuma has been another life changer for me. Wachuma is a plant medicine made from a cactus. It's also known as San Pedro. And we're also going to do a sweat lodge ceremony. We have a bunch of amazing things planned. So that is coming super soon. I also offer need-based scholarships. So just know that that's available to you if you want to come join us in Peru for November 1st. I have Akashic Metamorphosis, which is my online training that you are all invited to. That's on my website if you feel inspired to check that out. And join me in a container where you will be guided every step of the way in learning how to develop this practice and also going really deep into this practice, learning first how to use it personally for you, using it in the different areas of your life, from relationships to health to life purpose to basically all the places you like to explore, and then opening to sharing it with others. And then we open into spiritual business development. Okay, I feel like that's what I want to share for now. I feel like I have Akashic brain right now from doing my best to remain in a more channeled state and sharing with you what I pray serves you. I really pray that today serves you and inspires you. I'll be doing the part 2 soon so that I can introduce you to the prayer, because I really want to share the prayer with all of you so that you can use the prayer to explore your own Akashic connection and your own Akashic practice. Yeah, and so much love to all of you. I really, really appreciate you being here. I loved sharing with you. If you want to write to me around how this experience was for you, you're so welcome to. And if you want to unmute yourselves and just say bye, you are welcome to as well.
Daniela, that was gorgeous. I love you. Thank you.
Love you, Carmen. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Danny. That was brilliant, brilliant. So deeply appreciate your presence. Lots of love.
Yeah, so much love to you, sister.
Thank you. It was amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ampa. Thank you.
Thank you
Nice
so
to meet
much.
you.
Thank you.
I see you, Raluca. Hi, love. Okay. Love all of you. Thank you. Mwah. See you next time, hopefully.